Hello. So I am going to start by reminding everyone what the most important part of any sort of a democratic system is, that there is an opposition. That's the important thing. It's something I expressed fear about after I'd come down a little bit from my joy at the Conservative Party's win last December. And the scope and size of their win. I also, either in that same video or the next one, I said the problem with such a high majority is that you aren't going to get a proper opposition. Well, actually, you wouldn't have got a proper opposition anyway, because the Labour Party is not a proper opposition just yet. And the only person who is actually providing some cogent arguments is Keir Starmer, but he's one man and he's surrounded by a bunch of idiots. Now, who are taking, and I'm sorry to say this, you guys in the USA, but taking the American line in politics. I do hope this stops quite soon. And by the American line, I mean this. When you have a situation which has to be dealt with by politics, you get the government that proposes a certain course of action. And then you get the opposition who have to come up with an alternative. It's not such a hot idea if the opposition says, oh yeah, you're doing fine, as you were, carry on. That's not what the opposition is for. The opposition is for finding the faults in the course of action proposed by the government and possibly modifying proposed laws or providing alternatives which might be incorporated into the finished bill. That is the whole point. So when Keir Starmer comes onto the podium, or ascends to the podium rather, and accuses the government of not acting properly, and for this reason, 1, 2, 3, he is doing no more than his job. And so whatever he says, however I might disagree with it, that is what he is there to do. The reason I mentioned American politics is because the Democratic Party, which is at the moment the opposition, seem to have forgotten that. And in place of arguments, they're just insulting the Republican incumbents. That is not, they seem to think that's what politics is all about. And because of the sort of quality of people, a lot of the people, sorry, this isn't true. There are some good, solid democratic politicians, but they aren't being heard. And who are being heard are a bunch of loudmouth activists who don't really understand politics properly and who are being given a platform by mainstream media, which also doesn't understand politics properly. When I rule the world, one of the first things that will be on the school curriculum will be debates. One debate after the other. And, you can teach a lot in a debate. I've organised them myself. But you've got to make the people who are doing the debate research what they're going to be debating about. So you can take a historical figure. You can say he's a bad guy, like Richard III is a bad guy. And then, no, he wasn't a bad guy. He was a good guy. You have two people debating what he did, what he didn't do. And then everybody knows a lot more about Richard III. We reach a consensus about Richard III, and the information has got through, as well as the idea that there's never just one side to any issue. All right, but that's hang on, where are my notes? Right, so that's my little attempt to reorganise society, isn't it? Now, we've got here a speech by Keir Starmer, who is the leader of the opposition, and what's called in the United Kingdom, by the way, Her Majesty's loyal opposition, just to make sure that you know that they're not supposed to be the sort of opposition that's going to open the back door to foreign troops or anything like that, although some of them seem to be inclined to do that. So we've got Keir Starmer here talking, and this is, now I'm not going to go through the whole speech. I'll go through the first few minutes. It's 10 minutes long. If I went through everything, the whole thing, a whole critique would take 30 minutes. I'm not going to do that. You're not going to do that. So I'll just go through the first few bits, and we can take away some and give you, and I'll let you have my opinion of what he's saying, and you can make up your mind about how honest he's being. But don't imagine that he has to be honest. He is the opposition. He knows what the opposition should be. The opposition should be, as much as possible, opposing what the government is doing. That is his job. Now, in order to do that, he will concentrate on statistics. He has to be honest about the statistics, but you can always draw different conclusions from them. So this is the first bit.
The government has not got a credible plan to slow infections. It has lost control of the virus.
Now, what he's saying there is that there are more people in hospital now than there were on the 23rd of March. And this is a very good example of how the opposition operates and how it should operate and how we should be aware of the argument. Because, yes, there may very well be more people in hospital. That could be because now more people are being put in hospital. It could be that on the 23rd of March, they didn't have the spaces, so they tried to keep people home as much as they could. It could be that there's more of an inclination to hospitalise now. It could be that more people are in hospital and surviving longer. So whereas they might have died within 3 or 4 days and then been cleared out, so that would reduce the hospital statistics. Now they're in hospital for 3 or 4 weeks. And the thing about COVID is it can keep you sick for a very long time, but only with the right medicines. So the fact that there are more people in hospital actually doesn't mean anything. But of course, he has to use any argument he can, and he's not being a bad person for doing that. All right, let's see what the next one is. Oh, just a minute, I'm going to sneeze. I hope that's not a bad sign. Right, now, let's see. And he says it's rising in all regions and among all age groups. And that might be true as well. Here, let's listen.
They're clear, they warn that a package of stringent interventions is now urgently needed.
Now, you see, there's this problem with statistics. So I'm not going to go through everyone. I shall put up here, I'll put a map showing where the hot spots are. The bigger the circle, the more there are. And you can see that it's really concentrated in the conurbations, which is not a surprise. Now, it says here, this article, I'll leave a link here. The number of deaths registered in England and Wales in the week ending 2nd of October 2020 was 9,945. This was 311 more deaths than in week 39. So in the week ending the 2nd of October, there's been just over 300 more deaths than there had been in the week before. And of course, we can be quite concerned about that. Of the deaths registered in week 40, that's the week ending October the 2nd, 321 mentioned novel coronavirus, accounting for 3.2 of all deaths in England and Wales. This is an increase compared with week 39, when there were 215 deaths involving COVID-19, or 2.2%. Now, if you notice how they say deaths involving COVID-19. So what they're saying is there were other conditions, or possibly life-threatening conditions. So again, we can't really rely on that as a figure. 3.2% is not a high figure. It's bloody high for the people involved, though. So I'm not minimising the sort of pain and suffering they're going through. The numbers of deaths in hospitals and care homes remained below the 5-year average in week 40, and I thought that was very interesting. So there are 233 and 81 fewer deaths respectively. So 233 fewer deaths in hospitals and 81 fewer in care homes. Well, now that's really very interesting, isn't it? It means that the hospitals just generally are not losing their patients. And this isn't just COVID, of course, this is other things, but the hospitals might have been emptied of the other things. So I'll get to that in a minute. But the care homes too, fewer deaths. Well, there are reasons I can think of for that. And the first is that a lot of old people who might have hung on a few months died in those first few weeks in March. So there are fewer people around to be doing the dying now. And the other thing is that, well, we've got our act together now. There's more protection equipment, there's better nursing. We have drugs now that do help. You know, we've discovered steroid drugs and antiviral drugs that actually have an effect. But it says here the number of deaths in private homes remained above the 5-year average. And this is quite a high figure, 725 more deaths. And why do you think that's happened? Well, I can only guess. But my guess is it's because these are people who should have been in hospital and who weren't in hospital because the hospital was trying not to take in patients in preparation for a COVID influx. Or simply because there's somebody who's not well and they don't feel, you know, they've got a headache or a bit of a flutter in their heart or something, and they don't think they want to bother anybody because of the COVID epidemic, and they don't, and then they get a stroke or a heart attack or something that would have been avoided had they gone straight to hospital in more normal times. And so we can see that COVID is still killing people. It's just killing people who don't have COVID. All right, so let's go on to the next one. What's this one here? Right, this is a good one.
3 things are now clear. The government has not got a credible plan to slow infections. It has lost control of the virus, and it is no longer following scientific advice. The Sage Minutes from the 21st of September, published yesterday, underline this.
The government has no credible plan for dealing with the infection. It has lost control of the virus. I want to talk about that because that's a huge problem. Not the virus itself, that's bad enough, but what Sir Keir said. Because I have to keep reminding people like him, it's a virus. You can't see viruses, and this one happens to be particularly infectious. You can't control a virus. And this strikes me. Now, for those of you who are living outside the UK, you might not know what Starmer is calling for is what he called he didn't call it a reset. Oh, I've forgotten what he called it. But it's something like a reset. A word will come to me. he's saying have another lockdown, another couple of weeks or a week or something, and that'll control the virus. No, he won't. It's a virus. I keep having to say this. Other people keep having to say it's a virus. We can't control viruses unless we lock everybody down and leave them in their houses for months and don't let anybody into the country ever. That's the only way. Total isolation. They did that in New Zealand. They did that in the Isle of Man. But let's face it, these aren't places which are sort of pass-through places, are they? And they could control it by isolating themselves. You can't do that in a country like Britain, apart from the fact that you can't stop people from coming in. Because even if you stop the airports and the ports, it's an island, there's going to be people filtering in one way or the other anyway. But also the population is too big and it's filled with too many people who couldn't give a stuff about the virus to follow orders. You're never going to control the virus. And this is the thing that I found so depressing about a lot of politics that goes on now, including the Extinction Rebellion stuff and the ecological things. And it's all part of the same mentality. That is, socialism believes that you can control nature, human nature, as well as the physical world. That is what, if you look at Lysenko, what was his name? Lysenko, he was a Soviet scientist who believed that you could actually control how plants grow and how animals develop by controlling their environment. And that was part of the Soviet philosophy. I once had a nice man who was a very committed Marxist, and I was saying something like, people are always going to want possessions or partners exclusive to themselves, that sort of thing. And he said, no, with Marxism, we will change human nature. No, you won't. But that's the attitude. And Sir Keir is saying the same thing. We can control, the government has lost control of the virus. You don't put a virus on a leash and take it out for a walk. You can never control a virus. You can control some of the worst effects. And that's where I have this disagreement with the ecology movement. The ecology movement and people like Starmer, that sort of socialist philosophy, their idea is shut everything down. Stop driving in your cars. Stop having factories. Oh, sorry. I've got a dog necessity here, yes? He can hear me shouting and getting angry and he's come here to comfort me. It's all right. I'm all right. But I'm talking to these nice people here, so you'll have to wait. Here, you just rest your head on my leg. That's right. So, yeah, sweetie pie. So, you shut everything down and you can control it. And, stop driving cars and you can control emissions and that. No, my attitude is, and I think a lot of people, don't try stopping people from driving. Try and find a way for them to drive more cleanly. Don't control the virus. Find the bloody medicines that'll zap it. That is the only way. Now, the original shutdown was important, I think. It wasn't a hoax. COVID was a nasty disease. It may not have been quite as devastating as we thought it was going to be, but there was no way we could know that. And there's no way we could know how it would mutate as well, because viruses have that nasty habit too. That's why you get a new flu vaccine every year. Oh, don't start on flu. I don't take the flu vaccine myself. I had a bad reaction once. So I'm not doing it. So I know what you mean. But even so, there is a place for it, and I don't run the risk of getting smallpox now because of vaccines. So I'm not on your side about all vaccines being nano computers turning me into a robot. Right, so I've gone right off the subject, haven't I? Yeah, control. The point about socialism and its various branches, the green movement and all the rest of it, is we see a situation, we see it's possibly harmful, so the answer is withdraw. Just stop what you're doing, go back to your caves, and that's it. Whereas the more capitalist attitude would be, this is a problem, we have to deal with it. Let's find ways of dealing with it. And this is two completely different attitudes to the way to deal with life's problems. And unfortunately, Keir Starmer is thinking along those lines. Now, let's see. Right, so what does he say here?
That a package of stringent interventions is now urgently needed.
A packet of stringent interventions is now urgently needed. Well, here we are. Stringent interventions, which means locking people down again. They're not going to stand for it. The first session offered people a solution, and many of them took advantage of it. Quite a few people suffered, but a lot of people, enough people, have said to me that they found it a real break. They actually felt they'd gained from it. And there were enough people who did that, but not now. Not when businesses are closing down all over the place. Not when your children are losing schooling, all that sort of thing. You can't do that anymore. So he's not taking, as I said before, he's just not taking notice of human nature. And that's the problem with, I'm afraid that's a sort of problem with the sort of people. I don't know whether it's because he's a socialist or because he's the sort of person who became a socialist, if you see what I mean. All right, let's see what the next one is.
With catastrophic consequences. They warn that just as in the first wave, the burden of a large second wave would fall disproportionately on the frailest in our society and on those on lower incomes and Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities.
He had to mention the Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, didn't he? Well, look, there's a problem here. First of all, catastrophic consequences. He just said it's going to have catastrophic consequences. Well, we don't know that. That depends how we handle it. We've now got all the Nightingale hospitals set up. We can handle those people. We have more drugs. We have better systems. The fact is, it's a virus which can be deadly, and it's going to be killing people, including people, like me. I realise that. And so older people have to be shielded. So we have to come up with some sort of system for dealing with that. And on that, he should be pushing the government. And he isn't. He's talking about, sort of blanket bans. So kids don't go to school because granny might get sick. Well, no. This is where, in my opinion, he's going wrong. He's thinking in terms of shutdown, and I'm thinking in terms of solutions. Okay, there should be special solutions for shielding older or vulnerable people. As for the Black and Asian minority ethnic communities, that's more of a problem for several reasons. The first is that a lot of Asian communities live 2 or 3 generations to a house. They live in more cramped conditions. There isn't that much you can do about it. But it's not just that, of course, is it? It's because Black and Asian communities and minority communities like the super religious Jews in Stamford Hill, they don't take any notice of the rules, of the distancing rules, even when they have that opportunity, although they very rarely do. There's not much we can do about it. All we can do is find solutions, ways of isolating these people if they need isolations, ways of moving them out of their homes if a one member has the illness and sort of splitting the family up. But a lot of them wouldn't stand for that anyway. So it's a serious problem, but it's not something that he's talking about. What he's saying is the whole of society has to shut down because the Black and Asian minorities are going to suffer more. No, that's just virtue signalling. Right, well, I'm going to stop there and I'm just going to go to the very end of what he said.
Introducing these kinds of restrictions isn't something anybody wants to do. This was not inevitable, but it is now necessary.
Well, you see, there it is. These restrictions, which he is proposing, will not help. What will happen is this, as happened the last time, it will die down because of isolation. And then as soon as people come out, the figures will go up again. This is, the elastic band effect, and it will always happen like this. That's the way epidemics of any sort act. Until we have decent medication, this will go on. And the only thing we can do is let people live their lives and protect the people who are most at risk. And he isn't talking about that, and that's a bit disappointing. But he's the opposition, and we've got to give him credit for at least coming up with the opposition without actually insulting the Conservative Party, who are not handling this well. I'm not defending them, but he's not picking up on the points of weakness that he should be. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Grambo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.